There we go. Now we can see my
Okay.
face too.
Nice. Okay, I'm gonna just jump right into it.
Mm-hmm.
When you study the Judaic, or if you want to go a little bit broader, I would use the term doctrinal. You study the doctrinal, the political, so like the political institution, no, the political institution training. So they do actually have private universities that a lot of mainstream politicians attend, and the university will actually train them like a full 4-year master's degree on social engineering. It is the systems that teach the implementation are taught and developed. Not the thing itself, but the institution that teaches people how to manufacture those actions and interactions. The corporate, so like seniority, hierarchy, hiree, manager, CEO, all the way up. So we have 3. Doctrinal, political, corporate. Is there a 4th one?
Media.
Well, they're corporations, so they follow the same. They all freaking the same.
Yeah. Information.
Problem. Yeah. Every single governing, more like commanding, every single commanding structure at the overseeing level for the whole planet, they all use the same bloody system. And part of it is, there's a movie called Thrive, and they investigatively look into those systems. And there's a handful of social commentators who step outside of, he called it the prison warden complex. And they make humiliation the shackles. He also called it the zone of the hassle-free zone. The hassle-free zone. And as long as you're within the norms, you don't get hassled. And so hassling, religious hassling, political hassling, it's like an institution using the doctrine to create basically a trauma bond, like a psychopath.
Yeah.
And they use button pushing purposefully, and they train response to button pushing. And so the educational institutions train response to button pushing,
Mm-hmm.
the deadline, the bell, the chime, the clock, the senior executive officer, the priest. Over and over and over. Everywhere.
False one.
Falsehood. Fraudulent. Yes.
It's so good to know what that is.
I feel you. I feel you're connecting dots. You're the first that I do this with. You're not here by accident. And you are so loved.
Yeah. I'm very lucky. I'm a very lucky person.
So, back to the old. When I was researching neurophysiology, I found out that for our neurochemistry to flourish, we need proper nutrition. So there is actually a specific set of molecular compounds that directly contribute to the body producing healthy and abundant levels of the neurochemicals. And when I found out that Tourette's syndrome is treated, air quotes, by providing synthetic neurochemicals. So that's part of the drugs that they give to people on the Tourette's syndrome spectrum is, so they give synthetic serotonin, synthetic melatonin, synthetic dopamine, synthetic etc., so on and so forth, all the neurochemistry. Thank the heck that I wasn't forced into that, and I've managed to avoid the pharmacopoeia of Tourette's medications because they're horrendous things and they are damaging to the human body. So then I asked myself, okay, so what is the actual primal or fundamental? Because obviously Homo sapien became vastly capable of complex thought, of neurological stability, of untold gracefulness, of crazy, soaring, transcendental, mystical enlightenment, so like all of these patterns that are potentiated within the human blueprint. Hello, welcome back. I was talking about neurochemistry because we have So basically, for medical modern pharmaceutical medicine treats Tourette syndrome with synthetic neurochemicals. So they'll actually prescribe synthetic serotonin, synthetic dopamine, etc. and so forth. And I met many of my relatives, my brethren in the Tourette syndrome community. I was sponsored a few years in a row to attend their annual Tourette's Canada is one of the most profoundly impactful organizations in the world. And they do lots of good things for people of the Tourette's community. And they used to have a yearly, they took a hiatus on the yearly conference. I don't know where their sequencing is on that, but they had to take a break and then COVID happened and stuff. So the conference has been discontinued for the foreseeable future. But in the early days, when I first learned about the organization, they sponsored me. And I actually attended a full-on Tourette syndrome conference, so I got to meet others who shared my diagnosis for the first time, which was an amazing experience. But at the time, when I went on those experiences, I found out that the main way that the pharmaceutical medical establishment treats Tourette syndrome on the family's, sort of informed consent and discretion is by mechanically regulating the amount of neurochemistry within the human body by arbitrarily adding extra neurochemicals in the forms of serotonin, melatonin, and dopamine. But the problem with those synthetic compounds is that they're horrifically hard on the physical digestive system. Terrible side effects.
Yes.
And so when I considered from a Terence McKenna neurochemistry standpoint, I thought, well, if the body can't produce the neurochemical molecules for itself, and the pharmaceutical industry has to believe that it has to regulate them, then I wanted to go straight to the primal source and ask the question, how does the humanoid system look after it in the first place? And what I found out is that there is nutrition for neurochemical synthesis. And when I researched the compounds that the digestive system use post consumption of food and the sort of digestive blood glucose relationship, ingestion, digestion, absorption, utilization. There's one ancient nutritional system that is highest in the world, and that is the Ayurvedic nutritional system. Yeah, you got it. You thought it. Yes. And when I researched, so I just did a Google search for neurochemical nutrition, the compounds that the body needs to build healthy, balanced neurochemistry is nutritional, wholeheartedly. And I mean, when's the last time you heard of a mass shooting in India compared to the US? Very rare. Hardly ever. Most of the internationally known criminalities are scammers that run under the radar phone centers. And that is an intellectual job, which is interesting. And of course, we don't produce mystics like Rama Maharshi or Sadhguru or anything like that.
We do, but we give them different names.
Okay. But I don't know, to me it feels like, well, obviously they've been at it for like thousands and thousands of years, or one of the oldest, but they're way ahead of us in that regard. Like, I feel like when I regard the entire Hindu lineage, me over here, you know, incarcerated by my own culture as an outcast, as an antagonist, something worthy to be like thrown into a padded cell and intoxicated. It's like my world is run by a teenager, a cultural teenager, so to speak. An occultic cultural teenager, correct? And then obviously with gaps and with all of the nutritional deficiencies and all of the instabilities of all of the nervous systems and the drug thing and the, you know, and the depression thing, and all of this it's severe, it's completely digestive. The whole shit show. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that a lot of the specific foods that the Hindus Ayurvedic prescribe, there are actual practitioners, nutritionists in the Ayurvedic tradition with a Western mainstream like nutritionist's license, with an Ayurvedic knowledge background, who will actually prescribe monoamine oxidase inhibitors of the B variety, which is the cranial, whereas the A variety is the intestinal variant. Our friend L, formerly known as Hugh, in the room there, we see him sometimes in there, the one that Amuro interacts with quite a bit. Yeah. He's been looking into Bacopa, Brahmi Bacopa. It's an Ayurvedic herb that is a strong MAO-B inhibitor. The cranial amine, the cranial amine, and restricting it, some Ayurvedic practitioners prescribe to people with schizophrenia in India as a nutritional supplement for Indians diagnosed with schizophrenia. And a lot of those plants and vegetables and foods and herbs that the Ayurvedic prescribes to nourish and stabilize nutritionally. The neurochemistry, a lot of them were outlawed to be imported. You weren't allowed, it was illegal to import and sell a surprising number of Ayurvedic herbs out of the Western market. Up until very recently. For at least the last 5 years, yes. And if a business was, not anymore, but it's a new thing, probably since the restriction on the drug war has been somewhat dampened, the whole hemp thing, it's gotten a little bit better. And so, and obviously, if one state can import it, then it makes it a little bit harder for a broad, universal illegality across the whole board. It liberates it somewhat and makes it easier to, but yeah, no, Canada and the US both outlawed from import, and if a business sold it, they could actually be fined under the previous system less than 5 years ago. Which, when I found that out, I blew my mind. It's like, dang, way more to this whole dang thing than we knew. Well, I don't think violence is the answer.
No, it's not. That's what a lot of people in this area would say if they were here. Like, oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Right. And, yeah, fair enough. So, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're going deeper. We're going down the rabbit hole now. I've been learning from Gabor Mate, who was traumatized as a toddler with his grandparents murdered in Auschwitz during World War II, and his mom, a single mom with a toddler, and untold experiences. And his life, he ended up in Canada, and he learned later about how trauma affects the nervous system. And so we bring trauma into the whole thought copia of this whole thing. So right now, I need to bring everything I've been talking about back to the artwork that is currently on the live.
Yes.
Okay. It's called Rosetta's Omega Web Mandala. Or Rome. The Rome. I won't be able to talk about the sacred geometry today. That is for later.
Speaking of sacred geometry, you should probably grab some protein. Can of beans. Please continue, I'll be right back.
I might take a moment to collect my thoughts. I find it easier when you're here to share. But you didn't hear me. Maybe you'll hear me later. Hey, I, ac- I actually need you.
Uh-oh.
You let the words flow out of me.
Sorry about that. So where were we?
I'm grabbing a link. We're getting into the nitty-gritty. All right. There we go. I'm going to send you a link. In DMs.
Did you send it?
Not yet.
Okay.
Things are slow. But that's okay. There we go. This powerful wheel.
I've actually used
It's wheels like this.
In my game on Saturdays.
Nice. Well, when you combine it with the neurochemistry, nourishing for neurochemistry, the pulse of trauma and of creating a traumatic bond between an abuser and the abused, withholding experiences from a humanoid so that those parts of the human blueprint don't get developed, manipulating the systems of exchange and of resourcefulness brings the whole thing into a circular reference.
Almost divides by
and so and in a good way. It's not all bad. We're a tough, resilient group. Nothing can, for all of their attempts at incarcerating us, we have prevailed. The human spirit is undefeatable. And we just need a white blood cell like me to come along and to just turn on a spotlight for the one in the now to regard their whole. And I had to kind of go deep into the unconscious things with the unconscious disciplines. But I'm not quite ready to comment on those yet. This whole conversation has let me witness the areas where I need to be more informed. And then I'll have a better sense of how to complete the wheel. But obviously I've shown you some of them. The Max Neef Hierarchy of Needs chart. The Declaration of Human Rights will definitely be in there. The permaculture design principles. Permaculture. So how does it all come together? Well, back to my Christmas wreath, which I'm sure your live stream, like on my live stream feed. Take your time. I'm over here eating. 2.
There we go. As well as psychological needs too, not just permaculture, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. So that's kind of the phase that I'm in, is deciding, because each, I once used the idea, or I once explored or contemplated or kind of went deep on this idea of a totem pole. It's an indigenous spiritual totem where they take a wooden carving of a collection of heads, and each head was sort of almost like a zodiac, or like, I think it had some familial, like the like in Mulan, where they have a little shrine of deities. I believe the indigenous totem pole had a similar vibe. And I'm sure at different levels, so I bet a family could probably have a totem, or maybe it was a communal thing where each village had a totem, something of that persuasion. But I definitely consider... Okay. I definitely consider the Omega Web Mandala in like a totem. I actually re-poeticized the word to be totemic. Totemic. Really?
I heard that word in a
wow.
That is a word.
So it's actually a word. Well, that's brilliant.
Barely, but yes.
Well, I feel privileged that I meet someone who actually is familiar with it. Because I've wrestled with that one for a long time.
Have you heard of the book Animal Speak?
I haven't.
It's really helpful for in your life. It's basically God talking to us.
Okay.
Often I'll see.
And you are being Christly by telling me about it.
I hope it helps.
Very much so.
Yeah.
It's been present in my life, and I welcome more wisdom about it.
Check my library. I might have a copy.
Mm. So, all of these things that I've detailed, and not just the positive ones. So, I am going to have a mandala totem, exactly like the one you see in front of you. But I'm going to organize each mandala wheel in a geometric relatability, sort of like duplicating the infinity symbol in a more angular way, and connecting a mandala of sort of symbolic eternity symbol equivalences. This here is kind of the prototype, though I think I will probably go through maybe one or two more versions before I land on the finished piece. And my instinct is telling me to go with the torus, or the oblong, basically the galactic shape, which is slightly oval and slightly concave, with a taper down to the ends. And my initial envisioning of this oblong concave mandala placed the wheel, this wheel, the diagram wheel, as like a web, and that it could be quartered or eighths or ninths in like geometrically, and that each one would represent the evil, chaotic, neutral, basically the alignment chart, and have the what do they call them? A fractal, like the Mandelbrot fractal set.
Yeah.
So this, yes, and so this is actually a proto-Mandelbrot uniting the sort of written nodes of humanity, some of whom I've detailed today, with the sort of, well, I actually think of it in a regional way. So like a neighborhood is like an institution, or a religion is like a continent. And so I could actually illustrate an institutional blueprint the same way that a map maker illustrates a continent. And so in the alignment chart, there's evil, which would represent the destructive, neutral, which would represent the indifferent, and good, which would represent the constructive. And it would be applicable. So you can be destructive to matter with radiation, for instance. So to have a genome, like a double helix genome, you need a coherence of the 4 base molecules. And if you apply the radiation poisoning force to a genome, then that is, and so the genome is a constructive symbologically, and radiation poisoning is a destructive. And every single element in the entire wheel can be affected by all 4 other quadrants. And so a humane quadrant so it then becomes like an enormous combination lock, or a pile of combination locks. And each combination lock, whether the combination lock is vibrational, energetic, atomic, molecular, cellular, household, or cellular, organ, household, neighborhood, city, region, province or state, country or state, continent, hemispheric, planetary, solar systemic, galactic, supercluster, omega cluster, universal, dimensional, and back to vibrational, which completes the cycle.
That reminds me of.
And-
I've got a name for those. Perception zones. Does that help make sense?
It does. Well said.
As a kid, I came up with
Wow.
it.
And of course, the chart, the charted, and the Akash, which is sort of, omni or omega history, and then back down to our own. And obviously, I'm a singular human on planet Earth, but I'm building a tool for the planet Earth to recognize itself and to acknowledge the trauma and the obsessed and the destructive and the constructive and the cooperative. I don't actually know where it will go. It's still being born. But I feel like it'll change minds.
Yeah. Say, you know what shape angels might be in?
Shape?
Yep. Three-dimensionally expressed.
Right.
Do you know what? I theorize what shape they are three-dimensionally expressed in.
Say, please.
The ones that can travel from wherever heaven is to here quickly on their own, I would assume either are or have tube-shaped technology that allows them to travel, and then, tube-shaped, though. This goes along with a sort of Galileo observation of beings that come from Earth, and they just zip off into a certain point in space, and it corresponds to old tales of that such thing. There is a sort of some mythos have them as a demon, others have them as divine, some have them as both. So it's possibly a demiurgic presence.
Whoa. Tubular, man.
Exactly. That's great.
I actually you actually downloaded something just there, and I went to Start Page, my favorite search browser, and put in tubular torus, and very, very helpful, actually. You might have answered a ginormous ingredient to one of my biggest questions that I've been, wrestling with.
Glad I can help.
Yeah.
What does this look like?
It's... Give me a sec.
I gotta look this up.
Yeah. Go to Start Page.
I'm gonna go. New eco shop. Tubular.
Taurus. My favorite one is to a Facebook link with a name Robert Edward Grant. The tube Taurus. Yeah.
What's that called? Mobius.
Mm-hmm. Mobius.
M-O-E-B-I-U-S. Misspelling, but it's M-O-E.
I recognize it.
Mobius ring. There's the Sonic the Hedgehog world is named after that. Inward facing ring that then also spins to the outward and is a contiguous shape though.
Whoa.
I think it's theoretically impossible or something.
And yet there they are.
Yeah, to make a true Mobius, as they try to say, but whatever. I'm still interested.
But then there's the 4D time illustration.
Mm-hmm.
That weird
Mobius ring. Mental
So, okay. Can the recording still see the illustration?
Hang on.
In diagram?
Yep. No, it can't.
Good. So, what the artwork will do will actually be to visualize the dynamic of the quadrants within every situation, depending on what is present, what is unconscious, what is conscious, what is unrecognized, what is recognized, what the center of attention is, and then what is considered or rejected or worshipped or just casually regarded, or, there's so many different soloic relationships to anything, depending on the human that is perceiving them. And obviously trauma has to be in there, and joy, fulfillment, the neefs and the declares. And my plan is to illustrate the whole picture, one mandala at a time. So if someone does not experience the developmental markers for part of the human blueprint system. In them, they would have a trauma of neglectedness. And in their mandala, the quadrant that belongs to, in various ways, would have a different color, indicating a split. And it's going to be very geometric. Because you can't actually tell just looking at that thing. But the flower of life is in there. The human energy field is in there. There's a lot in there.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to reveal what's in there. And what is revealed will be a symbolic, almost like a signature of that branch of the broader chartage, like an infinity symbol, but kind of like bridging the super simple of like the actual infinity symbol with the really complex, i.e. the Mandelbrot fractal, which is sort of at the max end of the other end of that complexity spectrum. And so if I can harness the power of the chart, the sort of mind map or diagnostician's wheel, giving each node its own category in the broader category of designations, then I can sort of help to shine a light that makes it very verbalizable and regardable. And when I'm in an interaction with a person and they're embodying a censorship or an antagonization or a traumaticism or a malnourishment or a dysregulation, or the opposite of all those in the positive capacity, then I can really understand the whole human, possibly even more than they may regard themselves or have a capacity to relate to themselves. Because if they're lost in some pattern, which is generally the case in most people. And of course, I'm teaching others to see the whole picture.
Yes.
And I think the next stage is for me to actually synthesize all of these ideas into the geometry, the whole mandala, like the illustration basically. And because it's so complex, I have to use a combo of physical drawing and then digital. And so I actually draw the like I have all these graph papers in like piles and stacks around me. Here's an example of what I was working on at the family gathering. It's the same wheel.
Oh yeah. It's kind of.
And so this is, which is okay. I'll eventually I'll get a photo scanner and actually like photo scan all of these drawings that I've been working on all this. I have mountains and mountains, stacks of graph paper on the table behind the monitor. but I feel like I need to get a little more fluid, or I need to get a little more adaptable, where it's really easy, like anyone can work with the so-called little wooden the little wooden cubes with the letters on them.
Yeah.
Like, I want to get to that point with the illustration, and then I would love to be able to have the fundamental elements of the illustration in a digital form that anybody can play with. And that's been kind of, because I don't want to host the project on a mainstream, restrictive or unsafe platform. Like, I want to put it in a place that is more in alignment with the infinite and the resilient, but also at the same time provide the flexibility for people to take pieces of it and rearrange it, kind of like the public stock photos on a illustrations website. And I thought about training in the initial documentation for people how to use this program here, diagrams.net. It is downloadable. It works on Windows, iOS, and web browser, and Linux. So it works cross-platform. I don't know if it's a Web3. I think it should be diagrams.net. It's got the same like website label as some of the other Web3 addresses. I need to do a little more research on that. But it'd be great if they could just work with the things in this actual program. But I would need to teach them how to use the program. And then provide the raw files in some other platform, also Web3, And I basically need a place to explain each arm of the chart. Maybe a video would actually be better. Because otherwise, there's so much content, and I'd have to write a full-on book to serve as like a training manual.
We could break it down into training diagrams, like diagnostic. That sounds about right.
That's a good idea.
Did we go over the Science handbook with you yet? I only gave you 2 exercises.
No, but I'm not.
Don't worry about it.
I feel like that is better done later, after I've eaten dinner. My my brain has gone through a lot of calories, and I wanted to finish this and then finish dinner. I feel like I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish with this recording today.
Should I hit pause? Or stop recording?
Hit stop. Stop recording.